What's going on, everybody? Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. I have been looking forward to this all week long. Our good friend, Rachel Hopmayer, who is extremely evil and left us for Buffalo and now Detroit, is nice enough at least to come back and join us to preview Packers-Lions this upcoming Sunday. Rachel, I am so glad to have you back. How the heck are you doing?
I'm so great. Even better to be here. This is like my comfort zone again, to be back on Pack a Day. I was so lucky to be on this and share moments with you every week to talk about football. So it's only right to do it again.
And I know you've warmed up already by going on Pack's What She Said and that other rival podcast of ours that we don't talk about. So now you're able to have your A+ material on your favorite show, of course, which is Pack a Day. I kid. But you can find her on Twitter at Rachel Hopmayer. She is a sports reporter and anchor for CBS Detroit, which is not as good as anything in Green Bay, but it's still, it's pretty great, I guess. Let me start there. Let me ask you this, Rachel, as we kick things off. Of all your markets that you've covered, why was Green Bay your favorite?
Green Bay was a really special time for me. I had finally left my college town. I went to school in DC, stayed working for a sports network there. So going to Green Bay was a big step for me to leave and move to the Midwest as an East Coast girl. The pandemic was very interesting for my time there, of course, but Green Bay is unlike anything else in the Midwest. We know that. I made friends for life, colleagues for life, relationships that I'll always cherish. Had so many cheese curds. I'm probably going to have way too many this weekend. You cannot forget about Hinterland's cherry wheat beer. I think the best beer this side of the country. Just a lot of special things there that I'm so excited to dip my toes back in and rejuvenate with.
Well, Green Bay misses you, and we're happy to have you back, even if it's just for a couple of days. We're excited to see you at Packers Lions this weekend. But let's start there. Let's go over this game. And actually, before we even get to the game itself, tell me a little bit about this Detroit Lions season, how they've come so far this year already. They're playing unbelievable football, just tearing through opponents. They made Tennessee Titans look like they were a JV team this past week. But tell me about the story of the season so far for Detroit.
It's been really fascinating football to watch. If I have the audacity to come back in this division, at least I'm covering a team that we've got plenty to talk about here. Offensive coordinator Ben Johnson does a really incredible job at rolling out this seemingly shape-shifting, fluid offensive identity every week, while Aaron Glenn's defense is just so freaking consistent, but yet still surprises you every down. Yeah. It's fascinating football to watch, truly, that seems to be complete 80% of the time at least, which I still think is more than other NFL teams can say. But the players are the first to say this wasn't our best ball yet. Even last week when I'm talking to Amon-Ra St. Brown about, hey, you've now had 5 games in a row with a receiving touchdown, which is the first time a player's done that since Calvin Johnson in like 2011, 2012. And I said, what does that type of consistency mean to you when there is so much depth in this receiving core? And he said, this isn't even our best ball. And that is nothing to me when it comes to how this team is rolling on. So it's a very interesting and well-connected group of guys that is playing really significant football.
It's as much as I hate to say this, it's annoying, but it is very fun to watch them play. They play a fun brand of football. They want to run right through your face. They want to embarrass you. They want to put up as many points as they can. They will run trick plays on you. It's one of those things where, like, if you were a player, you would want to play in that organization. Like, it's crazy as this is to say, from all the history of the Detroit Lions, if you're a player, you kind of want to go play for Detroit right now because of all the things that they're doing, which is just, and again, an absurd thing to say based on the history. We're not that far removed from an 0-16 season. So the job that they have done revitalizing that franchise with Dan Campbell, it has been really insane to watch. And of course, Ben Johnson, a huge part of that on the offensive side as well.
Yeah, it's very addictive energy when you look at it. And you could say guys are players, coaches, but they reach different players different ways. It's the way that Campbell and his staff communicate and authentically ride for these guys every step of the way is such addictive energy that you understand why it reaches everyone in that room and why it spreads around the league. And it has not only internally, but externally changed their reputation and their brand. And that starts with the culture, that starts with things that Sheila Ford-Hamp has been implementing and permeating for years as she's kind of taken over this franchise. But none of it shocks me. I feel lucky I get to go in that room every day because someone's going to have something great to say regardless of what we're going in there to talk about. But that it's guys who I know are so proud of the game that they're playing and the organization to be a part of.
I'll be honest with Campbell, especially after the first couple seasons. Really liked him from the beginning, but it felt like he might be one of those coaches that had a shelf life, meaning that it's this a really exciting message and everyone buys into it at first and things can maybe go well for a little bit. And then you sort of hit that, roadblock where you can't get over the hump. And all of a sudden now all those things that you were doing that looked really fun at first now are kind of annoying. And it's like, oh, is this the right guy for the job? And I've just kind of been waiting for that next maybe evolution of that, because we've seen that happen with these kind of coaches before, these player coaches, these rah-rah coaches that lead with emotion. And sometimes it comes back to haunt them eventually.
Mhm.
I've seen no signs of that from Dan Campbell, other than, again, maybe he gets a little ahead of himself with some of his aggressiveness or something here or there. But like for the most part, even then, he's owned it. He's managed it. He's the one that says, I have to be better after it. And it's just, I don't see it happening because of his relatability with the players and how he really does take accountability and forces everyone else to have accountability around him. He's done an unbelievable job. He's a hell of a coach.
Yeah, and I think when you take it into perspective of this coaching job isn't just another line on the resume to him. I believe he said it to Colton Pouncey of The Athletic in 2022 that this was the job he wanted. This was always the dream coaching job he wanted when he transitioned from being a player. It's to lead the Lions into this new era, and he didn't get it the first go around, and he got it this go around, and he's really stayed true to how he's always envisioned this chapter. I think is very special. Even lately this week, he's been wearing this sweatshirt that says salty. That's from a few seasons ago, but it predated my time here. And I'm cracking up because I think it's hysterical. Like, okay, salty, with the Lions logo and like the salt effect on it. And it's supposed to mean, like gritty, salt of the earth, that kind of salty, like a little chip on the shoulder, if you will. But it's not gimmicky. Like it's truly how they carry themselves. And they will, like you said, run you into the ground. They will punch you in the face. And even though my mom doesn't think it's very sportsmanlike to run up scores like that, he doesn't care, quite frankly. He wants to beat you soundly in every phase of the game.
I don't know that it gets ever talked about enough, and I don't know exactly why, and it's probably just because Matt's done such an amazing job in Green Bay and Dan's done such an amazing job in Detroit. But the Packers interviewed Dan Campbell when they were interviewing for coaches when they hired Matt LaFleur, obviously, which is just like an interesting sort of side conversation or side note to this, that Green Bay did go with a different coach instead of Dan Campbell, which for the record, I believe is still the right move. I think Matt's been phenomenal in Green Bay, and I think Dan was the right move for Detroit. So both those things worked out, but it's just kind of an interesting side story nonetheless. I think one of the huge pieces of this Detroit Lions ascension, of course, has been Jared Goff, who has gone from sort of Rams castaway to this big time player in Detroit, who right now is very firmly in the MVP conversation in the league, which is, again, I don't know that anyone would have expected that when that trade was made. Tell everyone kind of about the ascension that he has made in Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, just named NFC Offensive Player of the Month after Aiden Hutchinson was Defensive Player of the Month for September. We'll talk about his absence after as well, but I don't even feel the need to regurgitate stats for this part. It's just he's throwing incredible ball, and it helps that he happens to have like accidentally perfect games where he's hitting every target and no one makes a drop or tips a ball or anything like that. But I think it's, again, a product of such complete ball around him that he's doing the best he can, and these guys just happen to elevate that and keep it going. I do think there has been a little bit more strength and a little bit, I don't want to say confidence because I think he's always been confident in his product, but just a little more quickness when it comes to leading into his steps and finishing his sequences than maybe we've seen the last few years. And I'm not talking about him like he's a young or an old guy. He's got the experience to be able to look at himself in the offseason and say, where can I improve? And I think he's finally really reached a good point that set him up for success this season. So when you're stacking all these wins together at the right time, it's going to make everybody look good, but especially the man who is propelling this offense, whether it's calling the right handoff on the field, reading his options right, and hitting just incredible targets.
Yeah, no, am I saying that he was in a bad situation in the Rams, but they went to a Super Bowl, obviously. But I think so much of, some of these players is the right situation, the right team, the right moment for the right reasons. And I think what the Lions did building this team around Jared Goff, obviously Ben Johnson, a huge part of this, the offensive coordinator, but also you give him Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, these two great running backs, an offensive line that protects him so incredibly well, which again enhances the peak of his powers because he's a pocket passer who, if you give him time, will hit all of those targets with accuracy and timing. He knows where to go with the ball. He has an unbelievable understanding of this Ben Johnson offense. And when you put the pieces around him, these big time playmakers, and put the players around him to protect him, to give him time, now all of these things that Jared Goff did well with the Rams and that he's done well throughout the entire course of his career, all those high-end traits come to the forefront, and some of the things that make him not so great sort of go to the wayside. And they've just gotten all of the juicy, great stuff out of Jared Goff without any of really the negative side effects. And all of a sudden you get like this really great quarterback, and it just shows. But I think so much scheme and fit and the right pieces around him can unlock that talent. We've seen that with a lot of these quarterbacks that teams have sometimes given up on. All of a sudden they have this revitalized moment. We're seeing it with Sam Darnold in Minnesota as well. We've seen it all across the league, but Jared Goff is definitely a huge version of that as well.
Absolutely. It cannot be underestimated how accurate the dude is, and about how he can pick the right play, and he knows the chemistry with his receiver so well that he can draw him out of coverage a bit more. That cannot be underestimated. And even if he was clicking with the scheme well, that all this doesn't happen unless he is precise. So I want to give him credit where that is due for that. But you're right. It's just coming. It's a good situation. There's a lot of conversation around the league right now this week, the Twitter discourse about underdeveloped quarterbacks, how the league isn't doing that. And obviously Malik Willis is a great example of a kid who's taking that upon himself and taking advantage of things at the right time to put a tape out there. But I really think, not that things haven't come together and that Jared Goff hasn't found his own brand of success and growth before this. It's just everything's coming up Detroit right now.
It really is. And again, that's a huge testament to their culture. Let's talk about something that's not as great for Detroit. And as you mentioned, that's that Aiden Hutchinson injury. Defensive Player of the Month in September, probably was on track to be Defensive Player of the Year. He was playing that well, a one-man wrecking crew for their defensive line. Somebody asked me in chat this week, they said, if you can take one Detroit Lion in the history of the Detroit Lions to add to this Packers team, who would you add? And of course, like the names that come to mind to me are like Kelvin Johnson, Barry Sanders. Like those are two incredible players, but I'm like, Green Bay has the weapons they need on offense. I think I would honestly take prime Aiden, like a pre-injury Aiden Hutchinson this year. Like what he was doing, I think I'll just take that, put that opposite Rashawn Gary. That's how good he has been. He is a massive, massive loss for Detroit. And it's not only him, right? Marcus Davenport, obviously out. Kaminsky, who had like 7 of his 33 pressures in week 4 against Green Bay last year. And then Josh Pascal is still on the injury report. I want to ask you about him as well, but let's start with Hutchinson, a just monumental loss for this team.
Absolutely. And when I was looking at the schedule, that was one of the first matchups I thought of when I'm looking at this game is Hutch versus Gary is going to be so good. I mean, I could just keep the camera on them all game and eat the popcorn. That is football you love to see between two guys who put their all into every down. But it is unfortunate. Obviously, he's been at Ford Field with his leg elevated, cheering on the crowd, but we're back on the road. So I'm not expecting the trip to Green Bay. It's just not worth it. The dude needs to rest and recover from surgery. Guys like Josh Pascal have been bringing up the edge in their own way. Nobody can be Hutch, but also nobody's being asked to be Hutch. There are other ways to defend the perimeter in that aspect, but it is a loss regardless. If that's going to be a weak spot, fine. It is what it is. Josh Pascal is TBD right now for Sunday. He's been out with an illness, hasn't been practicing much. So it's one of those really niche areas where we could see him. We could not. There are other guys that are able to slot and flex over, but it would be nice to get Josh back in. And I think that would make everybody just kind of feel good about having him back.
No question about it. I mean, their depth there is getting tested in every way, shape, and form with all the injuries. And obviously they go and get Marcus Davenport to be that complement outside of Aiden Hutchinson. Would be nice to have him, but again, he's out for the year as well. And then another player on the offensive side of the ball who's out for this game for very different reasons is, of course, Jameson Williams. He's had the ability to stretch the field a little bit and kind of be that playmaking wide receiver. He certainly seemed like he was taking at least a step in the right direction this year from a playmaking standpoint prior to the off the field stuff. But this will definitely be a loss for Detroit as well. They don't have the deepest wide receiver room in the NFL, but they've definitely found ways to make the most out of the guys that they do have on that roster. Besides, obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's just an absolute stud.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at this receiving core, you got Tim Patrick and Khalif Raymond ready to make plays, no problem. It doesn't matter how far down you are on this depth chart. Any play can be called at any time, and guys know that any given week they're going to be asked to step up in different ways, whether that's run blocking or catching the ball as well. So they have no problem finding a way to score a touchdown, that's for sure.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I don't think they're sweating this and be like, "Oh, our wide receiver depth chart just is," like, they're gonna be totally fine. Like, they've found ways. And Patrick and Khalif Raymond, 2 solid wide receivers, and they've really stepped up when needed to, and that's all you can ask for in those situations. But, Green Bay's obviously gonna have to find a way to limit Amon-Ra St. Brown and make some of those wide receivers do more of the heavy lifting. But even if they have to, they've shown the ability to do so when given the opportunities so far. We talked about Pascal. I know Malcolm Rodriguez is kind of another player who's potentially out for this game, but anything else that you're looking for from an injury standpoint, at least on the Detroit side, where Green Bay side is obviously a lot murkier?
When I look at the injury report right now, and I have it up in another tab, yeah, that Green Bay side is murky. We can get there. I'm not really too worried. Mekhi Wingo is interesting that he was a limited participant yesterday with his ankle, but I think he'll be fine. It was just a lot of rest for guys this week, like
Yeah.
Zeitler, Reeder, Ragnow. It's just been a long season, and they're doing a lot of work on that D line. So Jared Goff should be fine with that ankle. He just rolled it Sunday. It's not a big deal. Everybody else, Taylor Decker maybe is interesting just given his chest injury and he was limited, but he's so tough. I don't expect anything less from him on Sunday. So I think from a Detroit perspective, I don't see any surprises coming.
Yeah, I don't see Taylor Decker missing this game either. Obviously, from a Green Bay side, 3 big time players were not practicing in any capacity: Evan Williams, Jair Alexander, and Josh Myers. And then Jordan Love did practice, but of course, that groin remains just something that everyone's going to kind of be waiting to see. Can he go this week? Thoughts on the Green Bay injury report, or like how this could affect the game?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Jair Alexander, that Jaw's jaw in the backfield there. So that's a huge opportunity if he was going to be pulled, of course, on Amon-Ra St. Brown. But if not, if they were going to move him elsewhere in schemes, that determines Green Bay's takeover ability and turnover opportunities right there. So that will be huge, I think, for Green Bay. I think that sets a massive tone for them. I'm also, of course, interested in the Jordan Love situation. Just last night on CBS for my show, I was doing a quarterback comparison for our viewers who aren't watching Packers film as often as we are about what you're really going to expect if it's Jordan Love or if it's, of course, Malik Willis. And obviously Malik has taken advantage of great opportunities, like we've said before, and he's mobile and he can run it and gun it, and he's not afraid to do anything right now.
Right.
I wouldn't be shocked if the Packers say, you know what, yes, it's a division matchup, but we have to bye next week and we need Jordan for a longer sustained run. You have to make those decisions responsibly.
Yeah, I'll be interested. I think they're going to give him the opportunity to play. I think he's going to do everything in his power to play. He looked pretty mobile on Thursday at practice, just based on the videos. So
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, obviously, you never know if there can be any setback on Friday after he practiced on Thursday. We'll see if he practices today. We're recording this prior to practice on Friday, but my guess is he gets the opportunity to play in this one. I think he's earned that opportunity too. If he thinks he can go and wants to play, he's your guy. I think you give him it. But like you said, you always have to be cognizant too of the long-term approach, because he is still in the very infancy stages ultimately of his long-term career in Green Bay, and you have to look out for the long-term as well.
Yeah, and when it comes to the rain, I know that's on our topic of discussion.
Yep.
The weather, the Lions have only played one other grass game this year and one other outdoor game this year. So Dan made a joke about, making sure we have the right shoes and the right spikes, but God forbid Lambeau Field gets a little slippery out there. This groin injury turns into something worse very quickly.
Yeah, no, it's well said, and I think they'll factor everything in, no question about it. Let's talk about that. How do you see, because it's like 98% chance of rain, like it looks like it's going to rain and potentially even rain heavily in this game. How do you see that potentially affecting this game? And with Detroit, dome team, obviously, like you said, one grass game. I would think that's maybe slightly advantage Green Bay, but a lot of times also you get these more physical run and heavy games in this sort of situation, and that certainly is something that Detroit's not going to shy away from either.
Yeah, I really don't think a little mud on the ground is going to impact David Montgomery plowing through everybody, because as we've seen, he could just go over them too. So you can avoid that. But it is something to be aware of. I think it comes down to equipment and confidence, really. I don't know that that's going to impact their scheming or their planning too much. But I think if these guys can feel confident in it, we haven't had much rain here this week, so that hasn't impacted practice too much. They have been outside, but it was 80 degrees here on Halloween too. So I think it's going to come down to mentally preparing for it. I don't see it being an actual physical issue.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Detroit will be, I think they'll embrace it, if anything. I don't think they're certainly going to be afraid of it. And I think they'll like being, again, a little bit more muddy, physical. Like that's Dan Campbell's mentality in a nutshell, right? So I'll be interested to see how that kind of plays out. But you do get a dome team out on grass and the conditions, it's a little bit different. So we will wait and see how that kind of affects it. As far as the matchups go in this game, what are some of the key matchups that you're looking forward to that you think could ultimately affect or alter the ultimate outcome of this game?
I'm really looking forward to seeing who Terrion Arnold is pinned up against ultimately, because I've seen his growth a lot in the last few weeks out at the safety position when you're just, or cornerback, and when he's sliding between the two and you're looking at how much better he's gotten at being a little more specific with his coverage points and avoiding the flags, because that did plague him early on. And he's a rookie and he's a good rookie and he's allowed to make those mistakes to a certain extent, unless you're, let's say last night on Thursday Night Football when Aaron Rodgers was calling out Corey Linsley for calling back the best play of his career. It's not like he was calling anything detrimental back, but he has been able to really learn. And I'm interested if this is kind of be a big breakout game for him at the end of the day. This DB room has so much personality in it, and you have to have that much personality to be a DB. But every week someone is making a play like that. I'm interested in seeing which pass Brian Branch is going to break up, because there's going to be one of them. I'm interested in seeing how good Terrion Arnold's coverage is going to be. I'm really also interested in that Packers D-line. I'm always interested in the Packers D-line. I always think there's something to talk about there. And I just think that this has been one that I think players have had circled on the calendar for quite a bit. I asked some guys in the locker room this week, if you had to rank NFC North rivalries, where are we putting Lions versus Packers, Lions versus Vikings, and Lions versus Bears? Bears. And I know that not every one of these teams have been dominant at all the times in the last 10 years. So things are going to look different now that you're playing a really good Lions team. Most guys wouldn't answer the question on camera because they wanted to be a little apolitical with it. But some of them I did get to answer. And it's Lions Packers. It's number one. Like, that's just the Lake Michigan rivalry. And when it comes down to it, everybody's looking forward to kind of beating their counterpart.
And yeah, and not only that, but you have two of the best teams in football. This is going to very well could decide the NFC North and maybe even the NFC. Like the winner of this game has bragging rights for best team in the NFC, in my opinion. Lions on a 5-game win streak, Packers on a 4-game win streak. The only team that has more than either of those teams is Kansas City, who's obviously 7-0. Like, this is as good as it gets. And hopefully the injuries don't, affect this too much. We know it's probably going to already, obviously, because no Aiden Hutchinson. And obviously we know that probably a couple of those guys on Green Bay side are going to be out. But I mean, even still, this is as good and as fun of a matchup as you get. It is an NFC North rivalry. And Detroit, too, has the ability in this division to go 2-0 in the division with wins against Minnesota and Green Bay. If Green Bay would lose, they would go 0-2 in the division against Minnesota and Detroit. Both of those teams, or both of those games in Green Bay, that they would lose. Not to mention, Green Bay would go to 2-3 in the conference. Detroit would go to 6-1 in the conference. And as you get to playoff tiebreakers down the road, and some of those, like conference record, comes into play in a very massive way. So this could go a very long way in altering the shape of this NFC just playoff picture, and who ultimately could get anywhere between those 1 and 7 seeds, or even potentially be on the outside looking in if one of these teams were to go on a losing streak of some sort. So I don't see that happening. I think both these teams are going to be in it at the very end and be competing still, but this is a massive earth-shattering game in the NFC.
Absolutely. If the Lions come out of this winning back-to-back conference games, and then they have Chicago coming in on Thanksgiving, the fact that they were able to go to Minnesota and Green Bay before hosting a division game, I think also just so much to be able to say, we already won in your house, then you're coming back to Ford Field. I think this team will buy into that mentality very significantly. And this is just one of those divisions where you can either go up or down very quickly. It's very easy to lose momentum if you're losing against one of them, because the stakes are so high right now in the NFC North.
And Green Bay is going to obviously, again, want to get that win for a variety of different reasons. But if they could get that win against Detroit, one of the best teams, if not the best team in football, get that win and then go into the bye week and get a little bit rested up before they start that final stretch of their season, man, that'd be the perfect, just sort of boost that any team would need going into the bye week. That'd be the perfect way to end it, not to mention going on a 5-game win streak before it and then getting some rest. So this is a huge game for a variety of different reasons for both of these teams. I'm going to ask you both of these, one on each side, but I'll start with Green Bay. Why do you think Green Bay could win this game?
You know,
Or you don't have, you could disagree too. You could say they can't.
no, I think there are spots. I think Green Bay wins this game if you reach Jared Goff. If you can destroy the pocket, I think you can win this game. And I think that's really what it comes down to. Even the Titans managed to take him down 3 times early last week, and he comes out of that looking rough. If you can take advantage of holes and find the right gap, I think there is a way where you can at least put your hand on the needle a little bit and control the momentum. I don't think you're beating the confidence these guys have downfield. But I think if you can permeate the pocket, I think the Packers really have a chance.
I think they're going to have that mentality of just hitting him as many times as possible and just getting him on the ground. And you might have to give up some plays early by taking some risks to do so. But I think just, even if you look at the long term of just hitting him, making him feel uncomfortable and making him maybe start seeing, like looking down at the line a little bit more to see where guys are coming from. You could just plant that seed early, even just to make him feel less comfortable. Because again, if he gets comfortable in that pocket and is not getting touched, it's just, your game's over. Like Detroit's going to win in that situation. Yeah. Which kind of brings us to our next point. We kind of just answered it, but how or why does Detroit win this game?
I think it's going to be overcoming the Packers turnover game. I think you have to, and they are pretty good at controlling the ball, even on the run game. They only have, I think, 2 rushing fumbles on the season so far. So they're good with ball security, and they know punch outs can come. But I think you're going to have to then answer every time if the Packers are able to force something. And I think this defense can do it. But if you don't want this to just be a shootout until the clock runs out, then you do have to control the turnover game as well.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a huge part. I talked about it on the radio show. I just said, like, I think Green Bay can, like, if the turnover is even, Green Bay can still win this game. I don't think they can lose. There's no way I don't think they can lose the turnover battle like they did recently and still pick up a win. Like, I just don't see a world in which that can exist. Or was it the 3 turnovers against the Texans and still finding a way to win? Like, that's not going to be your recipe for success in this one. So if it's even, fine, you still have a puncher's chance in this one. But obviously, the more that you can get that going in your favor, the better opportunity you're going to have. So yeah, I'm very interested to see which team can be more efficient. And these 4 safeties, PFF's 4 of their top 5 graded safeties. Now, we don't know if Evan Williams is going to play, but in Joseph and Branch and McKinney and Evan Williams, 4 of their top 5, 16 interceptions combined between the 4 of them. Even if Evan Williams is out, you still have 15 combined between the other 3. So there are a lot of turnovers that are waiting to happen on the back end of that defense. And what safety group can, of all these top talented, unbelievable safeties, can limit the explosives for the other team and potentially get their hands on a ball or two from, for their own team? I mean, I think that could completely alter the course of this game one way or the other.
And again, the depth there too. Amik Robertson has 2 forced fumbles last week. It's just everybody eats any given day. It might be Kirby Joseph coming out with a couple plays coming up. It might be Brian Branch. That man is the most consistent pass defender I've seen. It could be anyone's opportunity. This defense is very cerebral, but they're always looking. You can never catch them off guard.
Before we get to your final prediction, I have another prediction that I want you to get to first. What is the trick play of choice for Detroit this week against Green Bay? What is their...
Ooh.
Are we going fake punt, fake field goal? Are we going, throw to Jared Goff? What are we thinking for a potential trick play this week?
I feel like we've done enough. We've done enough surprise pitches lately. We already had Montgomery going back to his quarterback days. Oh, there's Princess coming back. A Green Bay native coming back.
Love it.
No, I don't think it's going to be a surprise thrower. I want a fake. I want a really, really good fake. A fake field goal would be fun. Oh my God. That'd be so fun.
Fake
Ben Johnson is just so fun. Let's go with a fake punt. They're feeling real spicy on the punts, especially on those returns these days. So let's go with the fake punt.
You know what I could see them doing, because this is so on brand for Detroit, and maybe they'll save it for later when they actually play the Bears. But after the Bears failed offensive lineman fumble play, I could easily see them being like, no, everyone thinks that's a dumb idea. Watch, we're going to hand it to the offensive lineman as the fullback, and he's going to go score a touchdown. We have faith in our guy. He'll do it.
We already had a Penei Sewell hook and ladder.
Yeah, I know, right?
We're really having, this should be an illegal amount of fun that they're having and whipping out, because they're so confident in their ability to execute it and just stun who they're lining up against.
I'm
So
gonna say we get a Penei Sewell at fullback, handoff for a touchdown, and he runs
I'd
it in
love to see
just
it.
to
And I
troll
even bet
Chicago.
people in the bleachers would not cheer, but almost be shocked into cheering
It
because
would
it's
be it would be it would be so on brand for Detroit. All right, and then last but not least, your final prediction for this game. We won't hold it against you one way or the other, even if you're picking the Lions in this one. But I'll let you have the floor.
I'm gonna stick consistent with my score predictions this week only because I cannot keep track of a bunch of numbers we're making here. This is not a parlay situation. So I'm gonna stay 31-21 Lions. Whenever people ask me to make score predictions, I really do run through like a mini game in my head. And I
Yep.
see, all right, what do we think they can pull off on each drive, momentum, this, that. I feel like 31-21 is a good amount. I was also the same person that predicted 21-14 against the Titans last week, and I got the 14 right. So that's all
Hey,
I need.
you got the
I'm
win,
gonna say
and you got the points for the Titans, right? So
right. So I'm gonna say 31-21 Detroit.
all right. So hopefully you get two things wrong this week again, or at least one thing wrong this week again, and that's just this like it's flipped, right? So it's 31-21 Packers. I'm just kidding. Rachel, you're the absolute best. It is so great catching up with you. I'm so excited to see you in the press box this weekend. Tell everyone where we can find all of your amazing work as we want to still keep track of the Rachel Hopmayer train that continues to press through Buffalo, now Detroit. Who knows what's coming next?
Yeah, if you ever want to catch up on what's going on in Detroit sports, I have the blessed opportunity to cover everything for CBS News Detroit. You can always stream us online at cbsnewsdetroit.com. I'm doing the 6 and 11 almost every day. And then you can find me online at Rachel Hopmeyer.
Make sure to follow her. She's the absolute best. Again, on Twitter at Rachel Hopmeyer. You can find me at Indy Herman NFL. You can find the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. That's going to do it for Rachel and I today. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.